The rain hammered against my apartment window in downtown Seattle like angry fists demanding entry. I was hunched over my laptop, editing another corporate training video that would bore executives to tears, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Is this Ryan Mitchell? The voice was professional, clinical. Yeah, who's this? This is Dr. Patricia Williams from Seattle General Hospital. I'm calling about your mother, Linda Mitchell. She's been admitted with acute kidney failure. My fingers went numb around the phone. 3 years. 3 years since I'd heard my mother's name spoken aloud by anyone other than myself. The coffee mug in my other hand slipped, crashing to the hardwood floor and shattering into a dozen pieces. How did you get my number? You're listed as her emergency contact in our old records. Mr. Mitchell, your mother's condition is critical. We need you to come in immediately. The drive to the hospital felt like navigating through a fog of memories I'd spent years trying to forget. The last time I'd seen my parents was in this same hospital, actually. Dad had been getting routine surgery, nothing serious, and I'd driven down from Portland where I was finishing college. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be a chance to bridge the gap that had been growing wider since I came out to them 2 years earlier. Instead, it became the day they made their choice crystal clear. The ICU smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. I found myself standing outside room 314, staring through the glass at a woman I barely recognized. Mom looked so small against the white sheets, tubes snaking from her arms, machines beeping steadily around her. Her once vibrant auburn hair had gone completely gray, and her face was hollow in a way that spoke of more than just illness. Ryan. I turned to see my father emerging from the room. James Mitchell looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 years. His shoulders, once proud and straight from his days in construction, now curved inward. His eyes, the same green as mine, were bloodshot and weary. Dad. The word felt foreign on my tongue. For a moment, we just stood there in the fluorescent-lit hallway, two strangers connected by blood and separated by wounds that had never healed. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. She's not doing well, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. What happened? Kidney disease. Came on fast. The doctors say. He paused, swallowing hard. They say she needs a transplant. Soon. I wanted to reach out, to offer some gesture of comfort, but the memory of our last conversation held me back like an invisible wall. The things he'd said. The things they'd both said. I'm sorry, I said instead, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite the years of silence and the pain that still lived in my chest like a permanent ache, she was still my mother. Dad's jaw tightened. You should go. What? You shouldn't be here, Ryan. You made your choice 3 years ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. My choice? You mean the choice to be honest about who I am. You know what you did to this family. To your mother. His voice was getting louder, drawing glances from nurses and other visitors. What I did. I told you I was gay, Dad. I didn't commit a crime. You might as well have. The venom in his voice was exactly the same as it had been that horrible day 3 years ago. Walking around with that lifestyle. Flaunting it. Your mother couldn't even face the neighbors. I felt that familiar fire rising in my chest, the same anger that had sustained me through years of therapy and sleepless nights. Flaunting it? You mean living my life? Being happy? Happy. He let out a bitter laugh. Look what your happiness has done. Look what it's cost us. Cost you what exactly? Everything. The word exploded from him. The shame, the whispers at church, your mother crying herself to sleep for months. You destroyed our family for your perversion. There it was. The word that had echoed in my nightmares for 3 years. The same word he'd thrown at me the last time we'd spoken, right here in this hospital, when he told me I was no son of his. I didn't destroy anything, I said quietly, the fight suddenly draining out of me. I just stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. Same thing. We stood there in the aftermath of his words, the beeping of Mom's machines the only sound between us. Other families moved through the hallway around us, having their own crises, their own moments of grief and hope. Normal families who could comfort each other instead of tearing each other apart. She doesn't want to see you, Dad said finally. Did you tell her I was here? I didn't have to. She knows. And she said the same thing I'm saying now. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Don't call us again. Don't come back here. You're not welcome. The rejection shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd held on to this tiny foolish hope that Mom's illness might change things. That facing mortality might make them realize that love should be stronger than prejudice. I was wrong. Fine, I said, turning away from him. Tell her I hope she gets better. I was halfway to the elevator when Dr. Williams appeared, seeming to materialize out of thin air with that unsettling way doctors have of suddenly being exactly where they need to be. Mr. Mitchell? I need to speak with you. I glanced back at Dad, who was watching us with suspicion. It's about your mother's treatment options, she continued. Could we talk privately? The doctor led me to a small consultation room that smelled like coffee and stress. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the sort of competent air that made you trust her immediately. How long has it been since you've had contact with your family? She asked, getting straight to the point. 3 years. Why? She consulted the tablet in her hands. Your mother's kidneys are functioning at less than 10% capacity. Without a transplant, she has perhaps weeks, maybe days. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Okay. So she's on a list, right? The transplant list. She is, but given her age and the progression of her disease, she's not likely to receive a kidney in time. The best option would be a living donor from a family member. I understood immediately where this was going and my stomach clenched. You want to test me? I'd like to test all immediate family members. Your father has already been screened, but he's not a match. We need to check blood type, tissue compatibility, overall health. She paused, studying my face. Mr. Mitchell, I have to ask, is there some family conflict I should be aware of? I let out a laugh that had no humor in it. You could say that. Because from a medical standpoint, children are often the best matches for their parents. If you're willing to be tested. They don't want me here, I said bluntly. My father just told me never to come back. Dr. Williams set down her tablet and looked at me directly. Mr. Mitchell, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen families torn apart by all sorts of things: money, politics, religion, lifestyle choices. But I've also seen people put those differences aside when it matters most. When someone they love is dying. They don't love me. The words came out more bitter than I'd intended. Maybe not right now. But you're here, aren't you? Despite everything, you came when the hospital called. She was right, and I hated that she was right. Despite the years of silence, despite the rejection and the pain, I'd dropped everything and driven through Seattle traffic in a storm because my mother was sick. The tests would take a few hours, Dr. Williams continued. Blood work, imaging, some other screenings. You don't have to decide anything beyond that right now. I thought about walking away. I thought about getting in my car and driving back to my quiet apartment where I could pretend that my parents were simply people who used to exist in my life, not wounds that still bled when touched. But I also thought about my mother, small and fragile in that hospital bed, machines keeping her alive while her body failed her. Okay, I said quietly. Let's do the tests. 2 hours later, I was sitting in another waiting room, a band-aid on my arm where they'd drawn what felt like half my blood supply. The tests had been thorough and uncomfortable: blood work, x-rays, and EKG, psychological evaluation, the works. Now came the waiting. I texted my boss that I wouldn't be in for the rest of the week, citing a family emergency. It felt strange to call it that when my family had made it clear I wasn't part of it anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan, my boyfriend of 8 months. How's everything? Call me when you can. Nathan. Sweet, patient Nathan, who'd listened to me work through 3 years of family trauma and never once suggested I should just get over it. He'd offered to come with me to the hospital, but I'd declined. This felt like something I needed to face alone. I was scrolling through messages from concerned friends when Dr. Williams appeared again, this time with a different expression on her face. More serious. More urgent. Mr. Mitchell, could I speak with you again? Back in the consultation room, she closed the door behind her and took a seat across from me. The tablet was back in her hands and she was studying it with the intensity of someone reading bad news. The results of your preliminary tests are unexpected, she began. Unexpected how? You're a perfect match. I blinked. Perfect. Perfect. Same blood type, tissue compatibility is excellent, your kidney function is ideal, overall health is outstanding. In 20 years of doing this, I've rarely seen such a clear-cut case. She looked up from her tablet. Mr. Mitchell, you may be your mother's only realistic chance at survival. The irony was so sharp it was almost funny. Almost. The parents who'd disowned me, who told me I was dead to them, who just minutes ago told me never to come back, their daughter was the only thing standing between my mother and death. There's something else, Dr. Williams continued. Given how quickly your mother's condition is deteriorating, if we're going to do this, it needs to happen soon. Within the next few days. Have you told my parents? Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first. This is obviously a very personal decision, And given what you've told me about the family situation. She didn't need to finish. We both understood the impossible position I was in. Can I think about it? Of course. But Mr. Mitchell? She leaned forward slightly. I need you to understand something. Your mother is dying. Without this transplant, she will not leave this hospital alive. And right now, you're her only hope. I left the hospital as the Seattle sky was darkening into evening, my mind spinning with the weight of what I'd learned. The drive home was a blur of rain and brake lights and the echo of Dr. Williams' words, "You're her only hope." Back in my apartment, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at my reflection and trying to process the cosmic joke the universe had decided to play on us all. The son they'd rejected was the only one who could save them. The child they'd disowned held their future in his hands. Or more specifically, in his kidneys. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Nathan's number, then hesitated. How do you explain this? How do you tell someone that the parents who'd called you an abomination now needed you to literally give part of yourself to keep their daughter alive? Instead, I found myself scrolling back through old photos on my phone, stopping at one from 4 years ago. It was Thanksgiving before everything fell apart. Mom was laughing at something Dad had said, her arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling at the camera. We looked happy. We looked like a family. I wondered if she'd thought about that photo in the last 3 years. I wondered if she'd thrown it away. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Dr. Williams. Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to call so late, but there's been a development. Your mother's condition has worsened significantly. We're looking at hours, not days. The phone felt heavy in my hand. What does that mean? It means if you're going to do this, we need to know tonight. The surgical team can be ready by morning, but we need your consent to move forward. And if I don't? There was a long pause. Then you should prepare to say goodbye. After she hung up, I sat in the dark of my living room, staring out at the Seattle skyline and wrestling with the biggest decision of my life. Save the woman who'd given birth to me but refused to accept who I'd become? Or let her die and carry that weight forever? Outside, the rain kept falling, and somewhere across the city, my mother was dying while machines breathed for her. And in a few hours, I'd have to choose whether to save the life of someone who'd told me I was dead to them. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. But then again, life had never been particularly interested in being fair. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Instead, I paced my apartment like a caged animal, my phone heavy in my hand as I debated whether to call Dr. Williams with my decision. By 3 a.m., I'd worn a path in the hardwood between my kitchen and living room. I'd made coffee I didn't drink, started a dozen text messages I didn't send, and replayed every conversation with my parents from the last 5 years, searching for some sign that underneath all the anger and rejection, there might still be love. I kept coming back to that day 3 years ago. The day everything changed. I'd been home from college for Dad's surgery, minor procedure, routine gallbladder removal. I'd driven down from Portland, thinking maybe this would be a good time to have a real conversation with them about my life. About Ben, who I'd been dating for 6 months and was starting to get serious with. Mom had been fussing over Dad in that way she did, adjusting his pillows and bringing him water he didn't want. The hospital room was filled with flowers from their church friends, cards wishing him well. It felt warm, familial, safe. That's when I'd made my mistake. Mom, Dad, there's something I want to talk to you about. They'd both looked up at me expectantly, probably thinking I was going to tell them about a job prospect or maybe that I was changing my major again. I've been seeing someone. For a while now. It's getting pretty serious and I thought you should meet him. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as understanding dawned on their faces, followed quickly by something that looked like disgust. Him? Mom's voice had been barely a whisper. His name is Ben. He's a good guy, Mom. He's studying to be a teacher he volunteers at. No. Dad's voice cut through my words like a blade. No, this isn't happening. Dad, if you just met him. I said no. He'd struggled to sit up in the hospital bed, his face flushing red despite his recent surgery. I will not have my son doing that. Being that. Being what, Dad? Happy? In love? Being a pervert. The word exploded from him, loud enough that a nurse looked in through the door window. Being an abomination. I'd felt like I'd been slapped. Dad. Don't you dad me. A son of mine would never choose this lifestyle. This sickness. It's not a choice, I'd said desperately. It's not something I chose. It's just who I am. Then you chose wrong. Mom's voice had been quiet, deadly. You chose to turn your back on everything we taught you. Everything we believe. I chose to be honest with you. I chose to trust you with the truth about who I am. The truth? Dad had laughed bitterly. The truth is you're throwing your life away. Throwing away any chance of a normal family, children, a godly life. And for what? For this perversion. I tried reasoning with them. I tried explaining that I was still the same person, still their son, still someone who loved them and wanted them in my life. But every word I spoke seemed to make them angrier, more disgusted. Finally, Mom had spoken the words that ended everything. If you continue down this path, if you choose this lifestyle over your family, over God, then you're no son of mine. Linda, Dad had warned, but she'd held up a hand. No, James. He needs to understand. Ryan, if you walk out that door and continue living this way, don't bother coming back. We raised you better than this, and if you can't see that what you're doing is wrong, then we don't want any part of it. I'd stood there in that hospital room, looking at these two people who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and been proud when I graduated college. And I'd realized that all of that love had been conditional. Conditional on me being someone I wasn't. I love you both, I'd said quietly. I hope someday you'll realize that who I love doesn't change that. Love? Dad had spat. You don't know what love is. I'd left then, walking out of that hospital room and, as it turned out, out of their lives. The last words I'd heard from my father were shouted at my retreating back. Don't call us again. Now, 3 years later, I was being asked to save the life of the woman who'd disowned me. The cosmic irony wasn't lost on me. But as I stood in my dark apartment at 3 a.m., I realized something. This wasn't really about them anymore. This was about who I was, who I'd chosen to become despite everything they'd put me through. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Nathan's number. Ryan. His voice was groggy but immediately alert. What time is it? I'm sorry, I know it's late. I need to hear your voice. What's wrong? You sound. My mom is dying. The words came out flat, matter of fact. She needs a kidney transplant and I'm the only match. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Jesus, Ryan. I'm so sorry. How are you feeling? I don't know. Confused, angry, sad. All at the same time. I slumped onto my couch. They don't want me there, Nathan. My dad told me never to come back just like he did 3 years ago. And now they need you. Yeah. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? The question I'd been wrestling with all night. I think I'm going to do it. Really? I keep thinking about what you said a few months ago. Remember? When I was going through that rough patch after running into Mom's friend at the grocery store? That your parents' inability to love you doesn't define your ability to love them? Yeah. That. I rubbed my eyes, suddenly feeling exhausted. I've spent 3 years being angry at them. And I have every right to be angry. But if I let her die when I could save her, that makes me just like them, doesn't it? That makes me someone who puts conditions on love. Ryan, you don't owe them anything. After what they did to you. I know. But I owe myself something. I owe it to myself to be better than they were. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. You're scared. It wasn't a question. Terrified, I admitted. Not of the surgery but of hoping. What if I do this and they still reject me? What if I give them this piece of myself and they still think I'm an abomination? Then at least you'll know you did the right thing. And you'll know that you're nothing like them. We talked for another hour, Nathan's steady voice anchoring me as I worked through my fears and doubts. By the time we hung up, the first hint of dawn was creeping through my windows, and I knew what I had to do. I called Dr. Williams at 6 a.m. Mr. Mitchell? Have you made your decision? Yes. I want to do the surgery. Are you certain? This is major surgery and given the family situation. I'm certain. There was relief in her voice. Thank you. We'll need you here within the hour to begin prep. The surgical team is standing by. Dr. Williams? Before we do this, I need to see her. My mother. I need to talk to her. Mr. Mitchell, I'm not sure that's wise given. Please. I need her to know that I'm choosing to do this. I need her to understand that this is my choice, freely made, despite everything that's happened between us. Another pause. I'll speak with your father. Thank you. I showered and dressed mechanically, my mind strangely calm now that the decision was made. I packed a small bag for the hospital stay and called in sick to work for the rest of the week. Then I drove through the empty Seattle streets as the city woke up around me. The hospital was different in the early morning. Quieter, more purposeful. The overnight chaos had settled into the steady rhythm of shift changes and morning rounds. I found Dr. Williams waiting for me at the nurse's station. How is she? I asked. Stable for now, but that could change quickly. Your father is with her. She hesitated. I told him about your decision. He didn't say much. Can I see her? For a few minutes? Then we need to get you prepped. Room 314 looked different in the morning light. The machines were still beeping steadily, but there seemed to be more of them now. Mom looked smaller than she had yesterday, if that was possible. Dad was slumped in a chair beside her bed, looking like he'd aged another 5 years overnight. He looked up when I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "She's been asking for you," he said quietly. I felt my heart skip. "What?" "All night. She's been saying your name." I approached the bed slowly, as if Mom might disappear if I moved too quickly. Her eyes were closed, but as I got closer, they fluttered open. For a moment she looked confused, disoriented. Then her gaze focused on my face. "Ryan." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Hi, Mom." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I felt my own eyes filling up. "Mom, don't. You need to save your strength." "No, I need to say this. I need you to know." She struggled to sit up slightly, and I instinctively reached out to help her. She didn't pull away. "I never stopped loving you. Even when I was angry, even when I said those terrible things. I never stopped being your mother." "I know," I said, though I hadn't known. I'd hoped, but I hadn't known. "Your father told me what you're doing. The surgery." Fresh tears spilled over. "You don't have to do this. Not for me. Not after how we treated you." "Yes, I do." I pulled a chair up beside the bed, sitting down so I could look directly into her eyes. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you're my mom and I love you, and sometimes love means making sacrifices for people who've hurt you. But we said such awful things." "You did. And they hurt. But that doesn't change the fact that I love you." She reached out with a trembling hand and I took it in mine. Her skin was cold, fragile as paper. "I don't understand it," she whispered. "You're your life. The choices you've made. I don't understand them." "You don't have to understand them, Mom. You just have to understand that they're mine to make. And that making them doesn't make me love you any less. The church, what people will say. Let them say whatever they want. This is about us. About family." She squeezed my hand weakly. "Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at this woman who'd given birth to me, who'd raised me, who'd broken my heart, and was now asking for forgiveness while machines kept her alive. 3 years ago I would have said no. 3 years ago the hurt was too fresh, too deep. But sitting here now, seeing her so fragile and afraid, I realized that forgiveness wasn't something I was giving her. It was something I was giving myself. "I already have," I said. The surgery was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 8:30 I was in a hospital gown, for in my arm, going through the final pre-surgical checks. The anesthesiologist had explained the procedure, the risks, the recovery time. Dr. Williams had walked me through exactly what would happen. But none of that mattered as much as the look in my mother's eyes when they'd wheeled her past my prep room 20 minutes earlier. She'd reached out toward me and I'd taken her hand for just a moment. "Thank you," she'd whispered. "See you on the other side," I'd replied. Now, as they prepared to wheel me into surgery, Dad appeared beside my gurney. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, like he'd been awake for days. "Ryan, he struggled with the words. "What you're doing, I don't deserve it." "This isn't about what you deserve, Dad. This is about doing what's right." I was wrong. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them back for 3 years. "About everything. About you. About what matters." He reached out tentatively and I let him take my hand. I let my fear and my pride get in the way of loving my son. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Dad." "No, let me say this. Let me say it before." He swallowed hard. "You're braver than I ever was. Stronger than I ever was. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be your father." The tears came then for both of us. 3 years of anger and hurt and stubborn pride melting away in a sterile hospital corridor as they prepared to wheel me into surgery to save the life of the woman who'd disowned me. "I love you too, Dad," I managed to say as the orderlies began pushing my gurney toward the operating room. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia took hold was Dr. Williams's confident smile as she assured me that everything was going to be fine. But as I drifted off to sleep, I realized that everything was already fine. Not perfect, there would be a long road ahead, conversations to have, trust to rebuild, wounds to heal. But fine. Because love had won out over fear. Because a family that had been broken was taking its first tentative steps toward being whole again. And because sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is a second chance at life, both literally and figuratively. I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, then had the truck back up and run over me again for good measure. The recovery room was dim and quiet, filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the whispered conversations of nurses checking on patients. "Hey there, sleepyhead." Nathan's voice, warm and familiar, cut through the fog of anesthesia and pain medication. I turned my head slowly to find him sitting beside my bed, his dark eyes filled with concern and relief. "Nathan." My voice came out as a croak. "What are you doing here?" "Your dad called me. Asked me to come." He reached for the cup of water on my bedside table, helping me take a sip through a straw. "The surgery went perfectly, by the way. Both of you came through like champions." "Mom?" "She's doing great. Better than great. Dr. Williams says her body accepted the kidney immediately. No signs of rejection, and her levels are already improving." I closed my eyes, feeling a relief so profound it was almost physical. Thank God. The whole thing took about 4 hours. Your dad hasn't left the waiting room once. He's been pacing so much I think he's worn a groove in the floor. He called you? Nathan nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. About an hour after you went in. Said he realized he didn't know how to reach anyone who cared about you, and that made him feel like the worst father in the world. So he went through your phone and found my number. What did he say? He asked me to come because his son needed someone who loved him. Nathan's voice was soft. Then he spent 20 minutes apologizing to me for things I wasn't even there to witness. I think he's been carrying around a lot of guilt. A nurse appeared to check my vitals and adjust my pain medication. She was cheerful and efficient, explaining that I'd be in recovery for a few more hours before being moved to a regular room. The surgery had gone exactly as planned, she said, and I should be ready to go home in 3 to 4 days. Can I see her? My mom. Once you're moved to your room and feeling a bit stronger. She's been asking about you every hour. Over the next few hours, as the anesthesia wore off and the pain medication found its balance, a steady stream of visitors appeared. Dr. Williams, pleased with how everything had gone. A few co-workers who'd somehow heard what was happening. My college roommate Tom, who'd driven down from Portland when Nathan had called him. But it was my father's visit that I'd been both anticipating and dreading. He appeared around dinner time when the hospital had settled into its evening rhythm. I'd been moved to a private room overlooking the Seattle skyline, and I was picking at a tray of bland hospital food when he knocked on the open door. Can I come in? Of course. He entered slowly, carrying a small bouquet of flowers that looked like he'd grabbed them from the hospital gift shop. He seemed uncertain, like he wasn't sure what his role was supposed to be here. How are you feeling? Like someone stole one of my organs, I said with a weak smile. But okay considering. He sat down in the visitor chair, the flowers balanced awkwardly on his lap. I wanted to thank you. For what you did. I know I didn't give you any reason to help us. Dad, you don't need to. Yes, I do. His voice was firm. I need to say this. I've had all day to think about it, sitting in that waiting room watching other families support each other through their crises. And I realized something. He paused, struggling with the words. I realized that I've been a coward. I waited, letting him work through whatever he needed to say. When you told us about who you are, I was scared. Scared of what people would think, scared of what it meant about the kind of father I'd been, scared that I didn't know how to love you the way you needed to be loved. He looked down at the flowers. So instead of dealing with that fear, I turned it into anger. I made it your fault instead of my failure. Dad, let me finish. Please. He looked up at me and I could see tears in his eyes. I told myself that loving you meant protecting you from sin, from making choices that would damn your soul. But what I was really doing was protecting myself from having to challenge everything I thought I knew about love and faith and family. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with 3 years of unspoken truths. Your mother, she tried to talk to me, after you left. She said we were losing our son, that love was supposed to be stronger than judgment. But I was so stubborn, so sure I was right. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. And then she got sick, and suddenly all those things that seemed so important, what the neighbors thought, what the pastor said, what the Bible meant, none of it mattered compared to the possibility of losing her. But you didn't lose her. No. Because our son, our brave, generous, forgiving son saved her life. Even after we told him he was dead to us. He stood up, moving to the window and staring out at the city lights. Do you know what she said when she woke up from surgery? I shook my head. She said, our boy came home. Not Ryan saved me, or, the surgery worked. Just, our boy came home. He turned back to face me. And I realized she was right. You did come home. You came home even though we'd locked you out. You came home because that's what love does. The flowers ended up forgotten on my bedside table as we talked, really talked for the first time in years. Not the careful, surface conversations we'd had before I came out, and not the angry confrontations that had followed. Real conversation about fear and faith, about love and acceptance, about the ways families can break and heal. He told me about the sleepless nights Mom had spent the first year after I'd left, crying because she missed me. About the way she'd linger in the greeting card aisle at the store around my birthday, holding cards she'd never send. About how they'd both realized, slowly and painfully, that their rigid interpretation of love had cost them their only child. We went to counseling, he said, surprising me. About 6 months after you left. Pastor Williams referred us to someone. A therapist who specialized in families dealing with these kinds of conflicts. Really? Your mother insisted. She said she couldn't live with the silence anymore, couldn't pretend that cutting you out of our lives had made anything better. He sat back down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, she helped us understand some things. About unconditional love. About the difference between loving someone and controlling them. I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that they'd sought help, hurt that it had taken them so long, hope that maybe this conversation was real and lasting. What did you learn? That love isn't supposed to come with conditions. That faith isn't supposed to be a weapon. That being a parent means loving your child for who they are, not who you want them to be. He paused. And that we'd been confusing our fear with God's will. It was after 9 p.m. when Dad finally left, promising to come back the next day. As he reached the door, he turned back. Ryan? That young man of yours, Nathan. He seems like a good person. He is. I'd like to get to know him better. If you'd be okay with that. I nodded, not trusting my voice. And your mother, she wants to meet him too. When she's feeling stronger. After he left, I lay in the dark room, processing everything that had happened. 3 days ago, I'd been a son without parents. Now, suddenly, I was part of a family again, bruised and healing, but a family nonetheless. The next morning brought Dr. Williams with good news. Both Mom and I were recovering ahead of schedule. I was cleared to walk around the floor, and Mom was stable enough for visitors. She's been asking to see you every hour, the doctor said with a smile. I think you might be her favorite person right now. Just now. I joked, but inside, I felt that familiar flutter of nervous anticipation. They wheeled me down to Mom's room in a wheelchair, despite my protest that I could walk. Hospital policy, the nurse said cheerfully. Mom's room was filled with flowers and get-well cards from church friends, co-workers, neighbors. It looked like the room of someone who was deeply loved and missed. She was sitting up in bed when I arrived, looking more like the mother I remembered. There was color in her cheeks and her eyes were bright and alert. She smiled when she saw me, a real smile, full of warmth and relief. There's my hero, she said. I'm not a hero, Mom. I'm just your son. Same thing. She patted the edge of her bed, and I carefully maneuvered from the wheelchair to sit beside her. How are you feeling? Like I got in a fight with a very angry surgeon and lost. But good. Better than good, actually. We sat quietly for a moment, both of us adjusting to this new reality where we could be in the same room without anger or tension. I have something I want to show you, she said, reaching for the drawer in her bedside table. She pulled out a small photo album I'd never seen before. I made this after you left. She opened it to the first page and my breath caught. It was full of photos of me from baby pictures to my college graduation, including several I'd posted on social media over the past 3 years. Pictures of me with friends, with Nathan, pictures from my job, from trips I'd taken. You've been following my social media? Your father set up a fake account, she said, looking slightly embarrassed. Don Wilson, he called himself. I wanted to know how you were doing, if you were happy, if you were safe. I couldn't reach out to you, but I couldn't stop being your mother either. I flipped through the pages, seeing my life from her perspective. She'd somehow managed to screenshot and print dozens of photos, creating a chronicle of the 3 years we'd been apart. On the last page was a printout of a photo Nathan had posted just a few weeks ago, the two of us at a friend's wedding, both of us laughing at something someone had said. You look happy in this one, she said softly. I am happy. I can see that. And I can see that he makes you happy. I looked at her, surprised by the acceptance in her voice. I may not understand it, Ryan, but I can see it. I can see the way he looks at you in these pictures, the way you look at him. It's the same way your father and I looked at each other when we were young. She touched the photo gently. Love is love, isn't it? Even when it comes in forms we don't expect. Yes, I said quietly. It is. I want to meet him. Properly this time. I want to welcome him into our family. Mom? I know we have a lot of work to do. A lot of trust to rebuild. But I want to try if you'll let me. I want to be your mother again, really be your mother. And that means loving all of you, including the parts one don't fully understand yet. That afternoon, Nathan brought lunch from my favorite deli and spent 2 hours talking with my parents. I watched from my wheelchair as he charmed my mother with stories about his students and impressed my father with his knowledge of construction. Apparently Nathan had helped renovate his previous apartment. By the time visiting hours ended, Mom was calling him honey, and Dad was inviting him to help with a deck project he'd been planning. I can't believe that just happened, I said to Nathan as we made our way back to my room. Your dad asked me about my intentions with his son, Nathan said with a grin. I told him I intended to love you for the rest of my life if you'd let me. What did he say? He said that was all he could ask for. The rest of my hospital stay passed in a blur of steady recovery, family visits, and cautious rebuilding of relationships that had been shattered 3 years earlier. Mom and I talked for hours about everything and nothing: her fears about my lifestyle, my hurt over their rejection, our shared memories of happier times, our hopes for the future. Dad brought me books and crossword puzzles and we worked on them together during his daily visits. He told me about work, about the changes in our old neighborhood, about his struggles with accepting that his son was different from what he'd expected but no less worthy of love. On my last day in the hospital, Dr. Williams stopped by with my discharge paperwork and a smile. This is one of the most successful outcomes I've seen, both medically and personally, she said. Your mother's kidney function is perfect and you're healing beautifully. But more than that, she looked around the room, which was filled with family photos Nathan had brought from my apartment and flowers from both my friends and my parents' friends. Sometimes healing happens in ways we don't expect. Thank you, I said. For everything. For pushing me to get tested, for believing this could work. I just provided the medical care. You provided the love. That's what made the difference. As Nathan helped me gather my things, I found myself looking around the hospital room that had become the unlikely setting for my family's reconciliation. 3 years ago, a hospital had been the place where my family fell apart. Now, a hospital was where we'd found our way back together. Ready to go home? Nathan asked. I looked at him, this man who'd stood by me through 3 years of pain and healing, who'd driven across the city to be with my parents while I was in surgery, who'd somehow managed to win over 2 people who'd considered him an enemy without even meeting him. Yeah, I said. I'm ready to go home. But as we left the hospital together, I realized that home wasn't just my apartment anymore. Home was wherever my family was, the family I'd been born into and had almost lost, and the family I'd chosen and who had chosen me back. Home was big enough for all of us now. 6 weeks after the surgery, I was back at work and feeling almost normal. The incision had healed well, leaving only a thin scar that served as a daily reminder of the day everything changed. But the real healing, the emotional kind, was happening slowly, one conversation at a time. Mom was doing incredibly well. Her new kidney was functioning perfectly, and she'd regained her energy and appetite. More importantly, she seemed to be discovering a new version of herself, one that was less concerned with what other people thought and more focused on what really mattered. I resigned from the church board, she told me during one of our weekly phone calls. Mom, you loved being on the board. I loved feeling important. But I realized that some of the attitudes there, well, they're not attitudes I want to support anymore. Her voice was thoughtful. Pastor Williams asked me why, and I told him that I couldn't be part of an organization that would reject my son for being who God made him to be. What did he say? He quoted some scripture at me. Said I was letting worldly concerns override biblical truth. She paused. So I quoted some scripture right back at him. About love being the greatest commandment. About judging not lest ye be judged. About how faith, hope, and love remain, but the greatest of these is love. I found myself smiling. I bet he didn't expect that. No, he didn't. But your father was so proud. He said I sounded like the woman he married, the one who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in. These conversations were happening more frequently now. Mom would call me at work during her lunch break, or text me photos of things that reminded her of me, or send me articles she thought I'd find interesting. It felt natural, normal, the way a mother and son relationship was supposed to feel. But it was the family dinner invitation that really caught me off guard. We'd like to have you and Nathan over for Sunday dinner, Dad said during one of his visits to check on my recovery. If you're feeling up to it. I stared at him. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had been a sacred tradition when I was growing up. It was where important family discussions happened, where achievements were celebrated, where we gathered as a unit. I hadn't been to a Sunday dinner in over 3 years. Are you sure? Your mother's been planning the menu for a week. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, all your favorites. She wants to cook for her boys. He smiled. Both of them. That Sunday, Nathan and I drove through the familiar neighborhoods of my childhood, past the elementary school where I'd learned to read, past the park where I'd played Little League, past the church where my family had worshipped for decades. Everything looked the same but somehow differente, smaller, maybe, or less intimidating. My childhood home sat at the end of a tree-lined street, a modest two-story house with blue shutters and a front porch where Mom had always kept flower boxes. The yard was immaculate, as always, Dad's pride and joy. But there were new additions, a small rainbow flag hanging discreetly beside the front door, and a garden stone near the entrance that read, "All are welcome here." "Oh my God," I said softly. "Your mom picked out the flag," Nathan said with a grin. "Your dad told me about it when he came to visit yesterday. Apparently, it caused quite a stir in the neighborhood." I bet it did. Mom met us at the door before we could even ring the bell, enveloping me in a hug that smelled like vanilla and home. She'd put on weight since the surgery, healthy weight that made her look more like the mother I remembered from childhood. "You look wonderful," she said, holding me at arm's length to examine me. "Both of you." The house was exactly as I remembered it, but somehow warmer. Family photos that had been turned face down or removed entirely during our estrangement were back in their places, including several new ones, pictures Mom had printed from my social media, photos of Nathan and me that she'd somehow acquired and framed. "I hope you don't mind," she said, noticing me looking at them. "I had 3 years of your life to catch up on." Dinner was everything Dad had promised, comfort food cooked with love and served with the good china Mom usually reserved for holidays. We talked about everything. My job, Nathan's teaching, Mom's recovery, Dad's latest construction projects, current events, shared memories from my childhood. "Remember when Ryan was 7 and decided he was going to build a treehouse?" Mom said, passing the green bean casserole. "He spent all day hammering random pieces of wood together in the backyard oak tree. It was more like a wooden platform with aspirations," Dad added with a laugh. "But he was so proud of it." "I still have the pictures," Mom said. "You standing on that wobbly platform with the biggest smile, like you just constructed the Taj Mahal." "I felt like I had," I said. "It was my first big building project." "And definitely not your last," Nathan added. "You should see what he did to our bathroom. Complete renovation all by himself." "Our bathroom?" Dad asked, and I saw him and Mom exchange a quick glance. "Yeah, we moved in together about 4 months ago," I said carefully. Nathan's lease was up, and it seemed like the natural next step. There was a moment of silence that stretched just long enough to make me nervous. Then Mom reached over and squeezed Nathan's hand. "Well, it's about time," she said. "I was wondering when you two were going to stop pretending you weren't completely smitten with each other." "Linda," Dad warned, but he was smiling. "What? It's obvious. Look at them, they finish each other's sentences, they laugh at each other's terrible jokes, they light up when they look at each other. Just like we did when we were their age." After dinner, Nathan helped Mom with the dishes while Dad and I sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. The silence between us was comfortable now, free of the tension that had defined our relationship for so long. "I've been thinking about what you said in the hospital," Dad said eventually. "About love meaning making sacrifices for people who've hurt you." "Yeah. I realized that's what you've been doing all along. Not just with the surgery but with coming back into our lives at all. We hurt you terribly, and you had every right to walk away and never look back. But you didn't. You kept loving us even when we didn't deserve it." "Dad. No, let me say this. I need you to understand something." He turned to face me fully. "You didn't just save your mother's life. You saved this family. You showed us what love really looks like, not the conditional, judgmental version we'd convinced ourselves was righteous, but the real thing. The kind that doesn't give up on people." Through the kitchen window, I could see Nathan and Mom laughing about something as they put away dishes. They looked comfortable together, natural, like they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. "He's good for you," Dad observed, following my gaze. "Yeah, he is. And you're good for him. I can see it in the way he looks at you, the way he talks about you. He loves you the way you deserve to be loved." Coming from my father, the man who'd once called my sexuality a perversion, those words meant everything. "I want you to know," Dad continued, "that you'll always have a home here. Both of you. This will always be your family, your place to come when you need support or comfort or just want to feel loved." "Thank you," I managed to say around the lump in my throat. "And I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for what you did in that hospital but for who you are. For the man you've become despite having parents who failed you when you needed them most." We sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened, both of us processing the magnitude of how far we'd all come. 3 years ago, this conversation would have been impossible. Now, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The evening wound down with Mom insisting we take home enough leftovers to feed us for a week, and Dad promising to call Nathan about that deck project they discussed. As we prepared to leave, Mom pulled me aside. "There's something I want to tell you," she said quietly. "Something I should have said a long time ago." "What's that?" "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the man you've become, the courage you've shown, the capacity for forgiveness you've demonstrated. But most of all, I'm proud to be your mother." The tears came then for both of us. 3 years of hurt and healing, of love lost and found again, of a family broken and rebuilt stronger than before. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Both of you. You're both my boys now." As Nathan and I drove home through the Seattle night, our car filled with the smell of Mom's pot roast and the warmth of an evening spent with family, I found myself reflecting on the strange twists life can take. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a son without parents, carrying the weight of their rejection like a stone in my chest. Now I was part of a family again, scarred but healing, imperfect but trying, bound together by something stronger than blood. The choice to love despite hurt, to forgive despite pain, to rebuild despite damage. "Penny, for your thoughts," Nathan said, reaching over to take my hand. "Just thinking about how weird life is. How one phone call can change everything. Do you regret it? Any of it?" I considered the question seriously. The surgery had been major, the recovery difficult. Rebuilding relationships with my parents was an ongoing process that required patience and grace from all of us. There were still awkward moments, still topics we navigated carefully, still trust that needed to be rebuilt one conversation at a time. But regret it? No. Not for a second, I said. Even if things had gone differently, if they hadn't come around, I still would have done the right thing. But this, I squeezed his hand. "This is better than I ever dared to hope for." "Your mom invited us to Thanksgiving, by the way," Nathan said with a grin. "She cornered me while we were doing dishes. Apparently, she wants to cook a turkey big enough to feed an army, and introduce me to your extended family. Are you ready for that? Meeting the aunts and uncles and cousins who've been hearing about the gay son for 3 years. Bring it on," he said confidently. "If I can win over your parents, I can handle anyone." As we pulled into the driveway of our apartment building, I realized he was probably right. The hardest part was over. The rest, meeting extended family, navigating holidays, building new traditions that honored both who we'd been and who we were becoming, would be easy by comparison. "Nathan," I said as we sat in the car, neither of us quite ready to end this perfect evening. "Yeah. Thank you. For everything. For standing by me through all of this, for giving my parents a chance even after everything they did, for loving me enough to help me find my way back to them. That's what love does," he said simply. "It doesn't keep score, it doesn't hold grudges, and it doesn't give up on people. You taught me that, actually." "I did. The day you decided to give your kidney to the woman who'd disowned you. That's when I knew for sure that I wanted to spend the rest of my life learning how to love like that." I looked at this man who'd somehow managed to love me through my darkest period, who'd helped me find my way back to forgiveness, who'd seamlessly integrated himself into a family that had initially rejected everything he represented. "Is that a proposal?" I asked, only half joking. He smiled, that slow, warm smile that had captured my heart 8 months ago and never let go. "Maybe it's a promise," he said. "A promise that no matter what challenges we face, no matter what obstacles life throws at us, we'll face them together. As a family." Family. The word had taken on new meaning over the past 6 weeks. It wasn't just the people you were born to anymore. It was the people who chose to love you despite your flaws, who stood by you in your darkest moments, who celebrated your victories and supported you through your failures. It was my parents learning to love without conditions. It was Nathan, who'd never wavered in his commitment to me. It was the friends who'd rallied around us during the surgery and recovery. It was the extended family I'd soon be reintroduced to, and the new family Nathan and I might someday create together. But most of all, it was the understanding that love, real, authentic, unconditional love, was strong enough to bridge any gap, heal any wound, and overcome any obstacle. Even the ones that seemed impossible to cross. As we finally made our way upstairs to our apartment, carrying Mom's leftovers and the lingering warmth of an evening spent with family, I realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not the absence of problems or pain, but the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. We were all thriving. And that made every sacrifice, every difficult conversation, Every moment of uncertainty worth it. Because in the end, love really was the greatest of all things. And love had brought us home.